All right. Saxon lesson 9. Okay. So, what we're going to be talking about, and this is what Saxon lesson 9 is about, multiplying and dividing signed numbers. So right now, up to this point, what you guys have learned is how to add and subtract positive and negative numbers, right? When they say signed numbers, that's what we're talking about. Positive numbers and negative numbers, right? And those rules you're starting to get comfortable with, right? Yes? You guys remember how to do it, right? If you're adding or subtracting numbers and they're the same signs, what do? You're the same signs. You keep the sign. Yes, exactly. You add them and you keep the sign because they both have, if they're both negative, the answer's got to be negative, right?
Yeah.
And if they're both positive, the answer's got to be positive. You just add the numbers and keep the sign, right? What if the signs are different and you're adding?
And you subtract and keep the higher numbers.
Yeah, you keep the sign that's in front of the higher number, right? And then you subtract the littler number from the bigger number, and there's your answer. Put it after the sign, and there's your answer. Piece of cake. Now, and relatively, people start to get that pretty well. Fist of 5. Do you feel like you understand that? Right? Most of you, yeah, like I'm getting all 5s. That's right. So everybody gets it. The problem is now. Because this, totally different rules. And as soon as I teach this, you're going to be all confused about adding and subtracting signed numbers. Because you're going to be thinking, oh, 2 negatives. I see 2 negatives. It's going to be a positive. Right? Once I teach this lecture. You got to keep them straight. You have to ask yourself, am I adding and subtracting? Or am I multiplying and dividing? Right? They're totally different rules. Totally different rules. So you have to keep that in mind. So, for multiplying, so this should be in your notes. Make sure everybody writes their notes because I'm going to be eventually collecting notes and grading the notes. So, multiplying. And the way I'm going to write this, tell me if this is clear to you. I'm going to say a positive times a positive. Does that make sense to you? Like, in other words, a positive number times a positive number.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I'm focusing on just the sign because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the sign. How does multiplying affect the sign? Right? If you have a positive number and you multiply it times a positive number, what are you going to get?
Positive number.
A positive number. You've been doing this since like 3rd grade, right? 2 times 2 is 4. They're both positive. The answer is positive, right? What if you have a positive number times a negative number? No. In this case, it doesn't make a diddly squat of difference. Which number is bigger? I could have 1 billion times negative 1. That little teeny negative 1 just turned everything into a negative 1 billion. Right? It doesn't matter the size of the number. It just matters what the sign is. So Weston, what is it? It's going to be a negative.
Negative.
Remember what negative stands for? What does it stand for?
It stands for minus.
No,
Yeah, but what does it mean? But what does it mean? The opposite of. Remember that? Remember I wrote that up?
Yeah.
The negative means opposite of. So if I read this backwards, look at this. And of, what does of mean in math? Do you guys know?
Multiplication.
Multiply. The opposite of a positive is a negative. Look at that. I'm reading it backwards, but that doesn't matter. The opposite of a positive. Of is always multiply.
Yeah.
The opposite of a positive is negative. Makes sense, right? Yeah. But what about this? Big difference, right? A negative times a positive. The opposite of a positive is a negative, right? It's the same thing. Same thing. Now this is the tricky one. Negative times negative. All right, Molly, what'd you get? It's a positive. It's a positive.
Oh yeah.
A negative times a negative is equal to a positive. A negative times a negative is equal to a positive. Make sure all of this is in your notes. I'm going to check periodically. Negative times negative equals positive. Everybody together, say that again. Negative times a negative equals a positive. Again, negative times a negative equals a positive. Why? Why?
Because it's the opposite of.
Yes, the opposite of is times.
Of a
Opposite
negative.
of a negative is a positive.
Easy
Simple,
peasy.
right? Sorry, I apologize. I know, you guys tend to have the worst seat because of the way I write. I'm right-handed. I could write left-handed, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay,
Nice handwriting.
all right.
Cursive.
All right, yes. I actually had a student that wrote like that.
Oh.
If I asked him to write 2x plus 3 equals 5, that's what it would have looked like. And then I'd ask him, read to me what you just wrote. And he couldn't read it.
That's
And,
terrible.
and he couldn't figure out how to do the problem. Huh. Maybe it helps to be able to read your writing, right? Maybe. Just maybe. Okay, so that's multiplying. Now the cool thing is, for dividing, here we have dividing now. Do you guys know that every fraction is a division problem?
Yes.
I've said that many times, but everybody gets it?
Yes.
The numerator divided by the denominator, right? So I'm going to write them as, well, should I write it that way? Yeah. I'll write it as a fraction. So let's say we have a positive number divided by a positive number. It's the same rule. So it's a positive answer. Right? There's no negatives in it. We can't create a negative out of positives, right? But now, we've got a positive divided by a negative. It's the same rule. If you have different signs, it's going to be a negative. The negative wins. If I have a negative divided by a positive, I've never done it this way, is negative. I've always written it as positive divided by positive. Am I confusing you by writing it this way?
No.
You get it? Okay.
Yep.
Because this is often the way you're seeing it, especially in algebra. You're going to usually see division problems in a fraction. That's why I keep emphasizing every fraction is a division problem. So, and then the last one is this. We have a negative divided by a negative equals a positive. That's so weird,
Same rules.
but that's true,
Yeah.
right? What?
Same rules.
It's the same rules. They're identical. Makes no difference. So for adding and subtracting, those are the same rules. For multiplying and dividing, those are the same rules. Is that clear?
Yeah. Yep.
But they're totally different rules. In adding and subtracting, if you have two negatives, what do?
The opposite of a negative is positive.
If you have two negatives and you're adding and subtracting, not multiplying and dividing, adding and subtracting,
The negative.
you keep the sign negative and you add the numbers, right? So a negative 2 plus a negative 5 is a negative 7. But negative 2 times a negative 5 is? No, times. 2 times 5 is 10. So positive 10, right? Do you see the difference?
Yep.
Yes.
It's kind of like an odd plus an even equals an odd, but when an even plus an even equals an even, and odd plus odd equals an even. It's just like the same, like
Yeah,
7 plus
yeah.
7, they're two odds, it would equal 14.
Right. So we could boil this down into two really cool rules. I think they actually do it in here. In both, okay, this is what they did. They said in both multiplication and division. Okay, so for multiplication and division, this is our last thing we're going to write. So make sure this, I'll make this in a box. All right, if, number one, if you have like signs, what does like signs mean?
So they're the same.
They're the same.
Looks the
Positive times positive or negative times negative, look at that. If the signs are the same, the answer is always positive, right? So they said, if you have like signs, I guess you don't have the colon. And then they put this long thing and they say yields. Do you know what yields means? Like yields, produces a positive number. Positive number. Okay? If you have, what was their wording? Unlike signs. Good idea. Unlike signs. If the signs are different, meaning a positive and a negative, and you're multiplying and dividing, it yields a negative number. Pretty straightforward. So, let's try a few. Okay, how about a different color?
Can we just copy that?
Oh yeah, sorry. Copy it. I'm sorry. I watched the clock and then I'm suddenly freaking out because I know the bell's going to ring in negative 2 minutes or 1 minute. You will use this for the rest of your life. Trust me. This is important stuff. Right? Important stuff. Once you get older and they start giving you credit cards, you're going to be dealing with lots of negative numbers. Lots of negative numbers. I would recommend you don't. I would recommend you don't deal with too many of them. Okay, so what is this? Negative 2 times negative 8. Weston.
Wouldn't it equal positive 16?
Positive 16, exactly. All right, what is negative 3 times 7? Noah. Negative 3 times 7. Say it one. Did you say it? Oh. 3 times 7. What's 3 times 7? 21. So negative 3 times 7 is? We've got a negative and a positive. Negative 21. So a lot of times when I do these personally, I think what is my sign first? I go negative times positive is a negative. And I'll write negative. And then 3 times 7 is 21. So what about this? 14 divided by negative 2. Graham, is? Positive divided by a negative is, signs are unlike, it's going to be negative 7. Right. All right. How about this? Negative 44 divided by negative 11. Henry. Negative 44. Negative divided by negative is a positive. 44 divided by 11 is? 4. You got it. Good job. Piece of cake.
Done.
These rules are so easy. The adding and subtracting rules are so easy that I taught you last week or whenever. But you put them together and suddenly your brain turns to mush. I don't know why. But you will see, you'll be adding negative 4 plus negative 10, and it should be negative 14, but you're going to say, oh, 2 negatives equals a positive. It means positive 40. And you're going to say, no. You're forgetting the rules. You got to keep them separate. You have to have a part in your brain for adding, subtracting, another part for dividing, multiplying. Yes. So everybody, you are, homework. Read. You're right. We'll let you start class just a few minutes later. For next week. Homework is lesson 9. Read lesson 9 and do all the practice problems. That's A through H. Right? So lesson 9, read it. So practice problems.
A through H.
A through H. And then I want you to do 1
through 5 on.
after you read it, I think you'll be able to do these. So 1 through 12. 1 through 12. And then problem set, problems 1 through 12.
Okay.
Okay, all of them. I don't think they'll be that hard.
See you, Gary.
See you guys. Sorry about going late.
See you, Gary.
But I'll have you start late.
Wait, what?
You're going to start 5 minutes late for the next class, so you have your full break.
Yes!